Welcome, everybody. My name is John Haber. I'm the Field Services Director for the California Preservation Foundation, and I'm excited to announce today's program, Engaging the Next Generation of Preservationists. We have a wonderful panel today, and in a moment here, with our Education Committee member, Sana, will introduce them. But before I get going, I wanted to mention a few brief things about asking questions today and other sort of logistical things about the program. First of all, we encourage everybody to use the Q&A box for questions. That allows our moderators to more closely monitor the questions and choose the questions that are most relevant. And for that reason, I'm going to enable the ability for attendees to upvote and comment on questions. That way, our moderators can sort the questions by the most frequently requested questions. So we'll take those in the order of requested by attendees. We also will be monitoring Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn streams for questions. So for those of you who are watching our program today on those platforms, don't hesitate to ask questions, and I'll be sure that the moderators get those. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our Education Committee member, Sana Ahmed, who will introduce our panel today, as well as our other moderator. Thank you, Sana.
Thank you, John. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Sana Ahmed, and I work with the Los Angeles Conservancy as the Student and Family Program Manager. So this topic is near and dear to my work and also in my personal life as well. Moderating today's panel is Braden Templeton. Braden Templeton is a designer with TEF Design in San Francisco. He has worked as a designer on historic preservation projects ranging from public elementary schools in Manhattan to Beaux-Arts commercial towers in Cincinnati. We're now moving on to our wonderful panelists. Anna Sofer is a sixth grade science and Los Angeles history teacher at Thomas Starr Middle School in Silver Lake. She has designed civically engaged projects and curricula with the Friends of the Los Angeles River, LA Sanitation, and LA Department of Water and Power. Lena Curry is WSP's National Restoration, Renewal, and Closures Sector Lead, specializing in the evaluation, repair, and rehabilitation of existing, often historic and architecturally significant buildings. Lena is also the president of the Association of Preservation Technologies Northeast Chapter and co-chair of the Association of Preservation's International Committee for Academics and Research. She also helps to develop student outreach initiatives with both organizations. She is passionate about improving the diversity of the preservation industry through STEM outreach. I'd invite you all to give our wonderful panelists a virtual clap or just saying a hello in the chat to welcome them. Before we hear from our panelists today, we'd like to hear from you all. What inspired you all to be here today? In a moment, I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and I will invite you to click on that link, which will take you to a virtual slide. This slide will give you an opportunity to respond to the question, what brought you here today? So let me go ahead and grab that for you all. In reviewing the attendees, we were really excited to note that each of you are tuning in from all over the United States and a few international presenters as panel attendees as well. So we're very excited to have you all join us today. So the link in the chat will take you to a presentation that will allow you to respond to a question and what inspired you to be here today. And everyone in the chat will be able to, let's see here, what's happening here. See, there we go. See this response to this question. What inspired you to be here today? You can take a moment to think about this. This will help us understand what you are curious about and what you would like to learn more about today from us. I'll drop the link once again if anyone has missed it. Here we have our responses streaming in. Interested in efforts for historic sites in California. future of historic preservation, who will be my successor, inspiring activities and how they engage preservation. Looking forward to historic preservation advocacy by more inclusive and younger people, interested in outreach, training. This is fantastic. Such a great group of individuals joining us today, and I hope that you all continue these conversations. This opportunity is not only to hear from our wonderful panelists today, but an opportunity for you all to connect with each other, to learn from each other, and hopefully continue to think about this topic beyond today's conversation. Preserving the streets, connecting folks nationally, understanding community and what's exciting about communities. This is an important topic I see come up in various conversations that I've been a part of. Our supporters are aging out. We need younger people to get involved and to learn how to approach, how to engage. Can let us know in the chat if you relate to this topic from your various organizations. Wonderful. Well, keep all of these ideas and thoughts in mind. As John already mentioned, we will have a dedicated Q&A session following our moderated discussion today. But at any point, if you have questions, feel free to add those into the Q&A, and I'll look through those throughout our conversation, as well as the chat. If any comments or ideas come up, we want this to be an interactive and engaging conversation for you all. So please do engage with us. I'm going to now pass this over to Braden, who will begin our moderated discussion.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you all for coming today. Great introduction. I guess we'll have the panelists start presenting all the great work that they've done. So if Lena, would you like to start?
Sure, happy to. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to make sure you can see my screen, everybody. Can you see the presentation? Okay, I'm just going to briefly summarize. So I'm Lena again. I work at WSP as a building enclosure engineer on existing buildings. But a lot of the initiatives and work that I'm going to be sharing with you today are things that I've done through some nonprofit organizations that I'm a part of, specifically the Association of Preservation Technology, either international or Northeast chapter. So our overarching goal, or the level of involvement that I've had to date, is all with the end goal of trying to diversify the pipeline, trying to reach students early before they somehow, through a series of events that are out of our control, decide that engineering or architecture or preservation or whatever is not for them for a variety of reasons, right? So, you know, a lot of our professional industry interventions are at the high school or college age. And oftentimes what we're finding is that's too late. A lot of folks kind of read the writing on the wall, or they have these subconscious influences that are telling them that it's not in the cards for them, right? So one of our organizations is trying to do is really reach students at multiple levels. So this is just a very quick snapshot of, in 2022, the student outreach activities that APT Northeast did in our region. So it was a combination of things, right? We're trying to figure out what works. We've talked to other folks, other organizations, and we don't think that there's one solution. So we're trying things out, and luckily we have a lot of support from our membership to do that with some funding and some budgeting. So scholarships is something that we've always done. You know, I'll get into this a little bit more: career panels, tours, things like that. So there's a lot of different things that we're trying. But again, the thing I want to focus on is what we've traditionally done as an industry is sort of helicopter in and helicopter out. We've created these experiential learning opportunities, sometimes these project-based learnings, which is awesome, right? Because you reach students in an experiential way. It's not a classroom setting. They get to talk with professionals directly, and that's wonderful. Those are absolutely valuable and enriching, and this is one such opportunity that I was a part of this past year with Girls Inc. in Worcester, Massachusetts. The only drawback is if that's the only thing that we professionals are doing, they're not necessarily, the students that we reach aren't getting that reinforcement every day, either at home or in the classroom. So we're trying to find opportunities to reach students both in after school programs and in the classroom, and sort of resonate with them more frequently throughout their learning opportunity. So it's not a one and done experience for these students. One of the things we're trying at K through 5 levels is to do those pop-in experiences, but also, identify books and resources for the students, sort of supplement the library. One of the things we're doing right now is giving out what we're calling a preservation book list, and we're giving the books to local schools here in Boston and then also in New York. It's small, it's a pilot, we're growing it, so we haven't gotten any feedback yet, but just in sort of, this is trying to get kids at an early age exposed to the various trades and various disciplines that could be involved in preservation. It's not exclusively architecture. We found some books that identify and glorify, like the contributions of the masons and the carpenters and things like that. At the middle school level, we've been working, and we're really excited about this because we started this in Boston and we're adapting it now for Indiana. A middle school STEAM curriculum geared around preservation. And I know these images are a little hard to read, but the point here is that in doing this exercise and creating this curriculum in Boston, we realized that to teach preservation at the middle school level, it's really a multidisciplinary field, right? So it's hard to find that ideal teacher or that ideal classroom to teach this in, because it's English, it's math, it's history, it's science, it's all of these things. And then obviously, I'm sure Anna will talk about, some of the pressures being a teacher, right, is that you have to teach a curriculum. You have to sort of stay within guidelines. There's tests at the end of every year that the students are expected to pass. So what we've done is tried to teach preservation in a way that ties to Common Core curriculum, and that we've created a framework that hopefully can be adapted in other locations. And this is just examples of some of the coursework materials that we've developed. They have to learn net areas around this age. We teach them about muralists and how you can paint sort of existing buildings to tell cultural stories. And, how would they figure out how much paint they needed to paint a certain wall surface area? So we're trying to creatively tie preservation into the academics that are expected of them. At the high school age, what's amazing is that, there are incredible organizations that are already working with high school students, ACE Mentoring being one of them. APTI is currently working with ACE of Southeast Michigan and the Detroit Land Bank to do a design project geared around an existing historic building designed by Nathan Johnson, and to come up with adaptive reuse options. And the high schoolers are working on this currently, and I'm really excited to see what they come up with. And then more locally and at the college level, when we're doing outreach for my organization, one of the things we found, and it's the bar graph on the top right, this is from 2021, it's the number of members we had from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And students are the yellow bar, emerging professionals are the maroon bar. And the increase that you're seeing is that we made membership for students free. We took away any sort of cost barrier to students accessing our technical programming, being eligible for scholarships, all of those things. And we saw an instant increase in the membership. I'm happy to say that about a year later, we've gone from what that furthest yellow bar is 67 members to now we're up to about 100 student members that are actively engaged in the program. Another thing that we did just quickly before I hand it over to Anna is that when we do have student scholars, we now invite them to be part of our committee for the following year. So with those members as part of our committee, they've helped us organize student-only events, and they really give us a pipeline to the topics and the trends that students are interested in so that we can gear our technical programming toward them and actually make that membership valuable. So if you take anything away from this, it's a diverse approach. We're trying things out. I'm open to feedback. And if you're part of any professional organizations looking to increase student enrollment and membership, please make membership free.
Thank you so much, Lena. Oh, Anna, please take it over.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna Sofer. I am a teacher at Thomas Starr King Middle School in Silver Lake. I am usually a math and science teacher, but luckily my school lets us choose one class that we get to teach as an elective. And because I was so fascinated by my city's history in LA, I decided to teach an LA history class. So the course is a 10-week elective that is available to sixth graders, so 11 and 12-year-olds. And it is anchored in the KCET docuseries Lost LA. So that kind of gives us a through line from start to finish of where we're at with the curriculum. This is the third year of the program, and it is in the pipeline to be a 4-credit class for LA Unified. So hopefully by the end of the year, any teacher who wanted to teach this in the district would be able to have this class. So if you are like Lena, looking for opportunities to connect with students at school, fingers crossed soon, this will be a way to do it, at least in LA Unified. So students in this class look at historical events to really grapple with the differences between society's perception of LA and the reality of how complicated its past is. And the idea is to challenge the prevailing narrative that LA is this place that only existed as a result of westward expansion, and view LA as being a center of diversity and globalism for centuries. And so students engage really critically with our history in order to understand why LA exists as it does today. We talk a lot about race and racism, and how it continues to play a profound role in shaping our city. And it focuses on the experiences of Chicano, Latinx, Native, Black, Asian, LGBTQ+, and other marginalized people in LA from the 1700s to the present, as sort of a jumping off point for when our students will have to take ethnic studies in high school. There's a preservation component. So I've been lucky enough to work with Sana and the LA Conservancy, done a couple of virtual programs with her, and students choose a building that's on the urgent list from the Conservancy's website, do a little bit of research about the history of that building, and then write letters to developers, council members, whoever it is that can help get historic preservation for that particular building. So we talk a lot about what types of places are worth preserving, how might we work within existing systems to advocate for these places. And we also examine how representation really matters in historic preservation and connect with local government to try and enact change. This is also integrated in English, so students do a lot of research skills. They are learning about letter writing and email writing formally, and it's been really wonderful. So you can see over here, we have a letter that one of my students wrote in support of the Muffundi building last year when it was on the Conservancy's urgent list. As a science teacher, which is my usual subject, I also have had the opportunity to work in conservation of environmental places. So I've worked with the Department of Water and Power and LA Sanitation to create a design thinking project. This was with 4th graders, so 9 years old. We took neighborhood walks. This was at the time I was in Glassell Park, which is a neighborhood, I guess, sort of near Dodger Stadium for reference. We walked around, looked at spaces that needed to be improved with more water-wise solutions, be more sustainable for the community. And students took photos. They researched ways that they could improve that space. They made blueprints, researched sustainability practices, made these beautiful blueprints, and then had engineers from the Department of Water and Power actually come in, give them feedback. The students revised their blueprints, they made models of them, and ultimately they were able to present these to the mayor's office in the Department of Public Works in City Hall. And because, I mean, this is something that combines standards in math, scale models, ratios, measurement, persuasive writing, informational reading. All of these things are so cross-curricular. And so for 3 months, my students were engaged in this one project, which was very experiential. And so rather than say, okay, today we are going to read this book and then write about it, everything was anchored in this really real experience that had a really positive impact on the kids and on our community as well. We also do a lot of arts integration. So on the bottom over here, you can see that this student drew two perspectives of the same event. If you're unfamiliar, there was a neighborhood called the Chavez Ravine that was demolished. The residents evicted forcibly from their homes in order to build a housing project that never came to fruition, and then ultimately Dodger Stadium. So students chose two different perspectives of the same event, and it's called an agamograph. You can look from one side or the other to see the two different spaces. Another way that we integrated art was making these monoprints. So on the next to the Curve and Flow book, you can see Biddy Mason, who was one of the first Black landowners in Los Angeles, and then also a building that is Charles Lummis's house over in Highland Park. So always trying to engage students with artwork, with real stories and with real world experiences.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for sharing. I guess we'll get right into the Q&A to dig a little deeper. So each of you has taken slightly different approaches, both overlapping in many ways. But can you explain the methodologies that led to coming to these kind of practices and systems you've established?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, I mean, it was a group of people who had input to the various initiatives that I described, and specifically with the STEAM curriculum that we're trying to get into middle school classrooms like Anna's. We had academic folks who were either retired or sort of part-time, and their input in developing the standards and everything. But I think the commonality is that we can expect students to really grow, in a big number, right? Grow into this preservation industry and sort of care about the built environment and everything, unless they're seeing it more often and it's really tied to what they're learning. So I think it's amazing what you're doing, Anna. Like, what I love the letters to the mayor and like that feeling of importance in what they're doing. Because one of the feedback we often get is it has to be relatable. It has to be relevant to the students, right? Like, if it feels old and outdated, they're not going to carry it with them and look around. So one of the things we just try to really enforce is teaching them things that when they walk outside, they can sort of apply it and look in it, and it relates to their life.
Yeah, thanks, Lena. Methodology in the classroom for me always starts with schema building. So in education, right, schema is this mental structure that everyone has to help them understand how things work. And in terms of preservation, you'd be surprised all of the things that you really need to get to first before you can even start to talk about preservation. So first thing I do is connect to students' lives. We'll start with maps, looking at Google Street View, looking at photos of our neighborhood or places they might have seen or been to, and really build a sense of place. Then anchor it in real stories with real people. So we'll look at a lot of primary sources, analyze photographs or artworks or buildings, listen to interviews, have guests come in, especially when these guests look like my students, and really try and make it relevant, because especially in Los Angeles, the past isn't that far back. So there's always a connection to today that we can make. So for example, right now, we're learning about programmatic architecture in Los Angeles and roadside architecture, and how set designers in the film industry impacted architecture in the city. So the first thing I did was our schools in Silver Lake, which is really close to the Vista Theater, which that intersection is where the D.W. Griffith's Intolerance set was up in the 20s. So instead of starting with the history, I'll start with that intersection. Every kid knows it because they either take the bus from there, or their kid or their parent almost got into a car accident there. It's like a really crazy intersection. So start with that, then build on from there. So, okay, you've been to the Hollywood and Highland Center, that big mall. Everyone goes, oh yeah, I've been there with my mom. And that is taken from the old set. So all of a sudden, this thing from history becomes real because we can find the places that it used to be or where it's still reflected today. We also use we spend a lot of time talking about motifs in artwork and in architecture. So And that requires a lot of schema building too. So in LA, right, we have a lot of beautiful googie signs and mid-century facades. But in order to talk about that, the kids need to understand what space age even means and where does that come from. But most of them recognize the Jetsons. So how can we start with this cartoon that the kids have access to and then build on from there? Oh, you see the little star motif. Oh, look, it's on the liquor store across the street from our school. So that helping students to recognize patterns in buildings, so that they understand motifs, all of a sudden they start to have this vocabulary to talk about buildings that they didn't have before. They also, they know what a visually beautiful building is. And especially in California, we're starting to see these apartment complexes pop up. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the very modular, flat sides with the shipping container siding. We all know what that looks like. The students all know what that looks like, but they also know what garden apartments look like in LA with tons of green space and kind of centered around courtyards. The kids know what's more beautiful, what's more sustainable, and what they would like their city to look like. So even tying motifs into what they are seeing in their neighborhoods, that is also going to help once we start getting into the preservation component. Another methodology I like to take is the social justice lens. Especially in middle school and high school, students start to have this really strong sense of justice, and their idea of right or wrong is no longer am I following the rules or not, but more are the rules fair to begin with. So I really try and tap into their sense of fairness and justice. And so in the younger grades, they get a taste of what injustices look like for marginalized groups in our country, but it's hard for them to imagine because that was then and this is now, and the photos are black and white, and it only happened in the South, or it's really reduced to black and white. And most of my students are Latino, and so when they learn in elementary school about lynchings in the South, but when they learn that Mexican people in Southern California were lynched at the same rate as Black folks in the South, all of a sudden it becomes more real and connected to our place here. There's a wonderful artist named Ken Gonzalez-Day who takes old photos of Southern California lynchings and removes the victims from the photos. So we look at his work, we talk about what could the meaning of that be. And then that event is no longer far away. It's something that is very connected to today.
I just wanted to add one thing that just as Anna was talking, I was reminded of is that in our conversations early on about the curriculum and everything, and you sort of touched on it a little bit with like showing different images and examples, is really facilitating student-led discussion, right? Like picking an example, picking a place that's familiar enough, but there's enough going on that really sparks their discussion. And that's something that I think that we really have to focus on as practitioners or professionals coming into those atmospheres, because we tend to overcomplicate or we tend to have a scripted answer, and we need to go in with more openness to let the students really work through their observations and their processing and have like no wrong answers, right? Just get them thinking in that direction, and that's what carries outside the classroom.
Oh, absolutely. And also they're so good at identifying patterns in history as well. And that is really something that can push students to start talking about preservation. So eminent domain is a big theme in Los Angeles history, right? And we're asking questions like who was pushed out, who was not. The Chavez Ravine, again, and is where Dodger Stadium is now, where hundreds of families were pushed out to make way for a housing project that was never built. In Boyle Heights, we have a bunch of homes that were destroyed to make way for freeways, versus in Beverly Hills, you don't even have a single freeway. So why is that? And then compare that to a map of redlining, compare that to a map of air pollution, compare that to a map of property value. All you have to do is show it to them, and they're going to make these connections for themselves. Last year, the Mafundi building in Watts was slated for demolition. For out-of-state folks, Watts is a community that is 99% Black and Latino, has a history of underinvestment. And the Mafundi building has the only sit-down restaurant in this entire neighborhood. There's like 40,000 people that live there. So because students have now the schema of what does underinvestment do to a community, all of a sudden preservation becomes a social justice issue because they want to do this for this community. They want to do this for their neighbors. And that really helps kids see where they fit in this puzzle piece.
Definitely. I like the similarity of kind of giving students toolkits. And I think especially giving students at such a young age the feeling of ownership of something and a feeling of ownership over knowledge is really empowering because as a child, you feel like everyone's above you. You have so much that you don't know. So very good points about kind of just putting it in front of them, giving them the chance to kind of do it themselves and feel like it's their work. If we want to move on to the next question, so other than community organizations that you work with, have there been any other resources you two have connected with or used to help kind of leverage this development of your systems?
I'll just jump in. There's an incredible, wonderfully increased recently. That's a lot of words, but basically recently there have been a lot more funding opportunities. So part of the STEM initiative that I described, the Indiana adaptation that I alluded to, is through a local Indiana humanities grant. So what we're finding is that if we can create sort of a framework or a product that's successful in one location and do it with the mind that it could be adapted with local examples, like Anna was saying, like we did that in LA, we'd be pulling from the LA streets, you know. So again, the students were seeing what we were talking about in class outside on their walks and everything. So there's a lot of funding opportunities, I think. And I think it's really promising.
I think our communities are our biggest resource. I'm lucky because I got a captive audience of a bunch of them every day. But just last year, we were studying Japanese internment. We were watching a video about a man whose father was in prison in Manzanar, and he made a camera with the items that he brought into the camp. And one of my students goes, "Oh, hey, he's my neighbor. I know him." So now we have this amazing interview with this person that we looked in a documentary, and now it's more real. So definitely bringing guests into students. And it sounds like a lot of the folks in this webinar, you would be the guest, that you have, if you're an expert going into a science class, because now with the new science standards, the NGSS, there are engineering components that teachers are required to teach in all grade levels. So coming in as an expert to come teach about how preservation and STEM connect is absolutely something that you could do. We are at my school, we're also working with the Museum of Neon Art in Glendale. So we are so excited about that because not only is that the artwork component, we're taking neon walking tours. The kids are learning how to bend neon. It's just so engaging. Anything that can engage kids and get them excited is going to be your best resource. In LA too, we're really lucky. We have this this new-ish Netflix show called City of Ghosts, which is made by Elizabeth Ito, and each episode focuses on one community asset and the people who live there, and they highlight real people, and it's such a great way to get kids into it for the first time.
So have there been significant challenges along the way that have kind of impeded your progress, or some convincing you've both had to do within schools or even professionally?
I mean, I'll go ahead and start. So the biggest challenge that we've had is getting into the schools in a consistent way. And that is, again, just because there is so much that needs to be taught, curriculum needs to be followed. Anna seems very fortunate in that she has an elective class that is sort of a little bit freer. So that's been our biggest challenge and that's the reason I mentioned the resource of funding opportunities, is because we can't really expect teachers to take on a new curriculum that they might not have the background in and pay them nothing, right? So a lot of that funding goes toward teacher training and time for teacher input, so that the curriculum materials are actually viable for a classroom setting.
Thanks for mentioning that, Lena. That is definitely the best way to engage teachers is, a stipend goes a long way in getting teachers willing to try something new. So that's something I recommend. Reaching out to teachers directly. Once you have one teacher in a school who is down for whatever it is that you're trying to do, they're going to bring in their colleagues, and then that becomes a partnership that you'll have with the school forever. So I know that I've really appreciated like the LA Conservancy, the Friends of the LA River, the Museum of Neon Art. All of these orgs are people that we've had partnerships with for multiple years, because teachers see the value and they see what they're bringing to their students, and which is another interesting challenge for me personally in trying to teach about preservation. And with the pandemic, history fell to the wayside in elementary school classrooms. The focus is on math, the focus is on English, and a lot of teachers were told, you got to get these test scores up, and then science and history were not taught as much as they used to be. Not to mention that California's history standards are from 1998, so they're pretty outdated. So even if the kids were getting history education, there is a lot that still needs to be said. So for me personally, a challenge has been figuring out how to build schema for concepts with a lot of context. Again, I bring up Dodger Stadium to understand that. My 12-year-olds need to understand eminent domain. They need to understand redlining, historic underinvestment, generational wealth, housing projects. And to understand housing projects, you need to understand what the Red Scare is and what communism is. So all of a sudden, you're not just telling the history of a place, it is all of the things leading up to that. So my challenge has been, most of my students won't learn these things till high school. So how do I teach it at an age appropriate level in a short amount of time? And luckily, like Lost LA has a lot of great media that has been helpful for that. TED Ed has a lot of helpful media for that as well. Another challenge has been the school district, right? Like I submitted this paperwork for this to be a class a very long time ago, and it's kind of just stuck in the bureaucracy. So trying to push that through is also very challenging.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of that, in addition to, paying teachers to do this work to get the collaboration that we really need from them to have it sort of be part of the schools, is the repeatability and the sustainability of anything, because every school is a little bit different, or at least of my findings, whether or not they have a STEM block, whether or not they integrate that into the science program, whether or not they have teachers teaching multiple curricula at the same time, or if they have, allocated science, math, history teacher. So it's the repeatability, and like, again, going back to seeing it as developing a framework that is flexible and adaptable. One of the things we really tried to do from the beginning was all of the materials that we create are editable. It's sort of a pick and a choose, because you can't force anything on anybody, right? Because every single school system is a little bit different.
So within these methods, how have you assessed success, different rates of success within your program, and how have these factors contributed to the long-term impact of these methods?
I mean, for me, it's two things. One was, like I said, student involvement in our organization is one quantifiable measure that we've taken, at least for our involvement in high school and college age. And other than that, we've tried to be primarily supplementing an existing program. So we really rely on the feedback of that organization's, members or involved participants to tell us, was this helpful? Did you see a rise in engagement? Do you want to continue this relationship?
And Lena, that's exactly how I measure success, is how engaged are students. And because, I teach core subjects and I teach this elective, it's fascinating to see the kids that really struggle in math and science. And all of a sudden they are your star student in LA history because they're learning about something that's relevant to them. So oftentimes engagement in LA history is not an issue at all. I have students who are really happy to be there. My program is still very new, so I'm going to have to get back to you on any long-term impact. But, I think if my kids leave my class knowing that if they do their research and present their ideas in a thoughtful manner, people will listen, then I've done my job and I'm successful.
Yeah, and it's funny because we talk about this all the time. How do you measure success when you're intervening so young in kids, right? Like, are we really going to track kids from K through 5 or middle school all the way through college? And then what's the measure that they went into the engineering career or the ACE, the construction industry? Like, that tracking is sort of unrealistic at this point. So I think the measures have to be more like Anna just described, like the level of engagement, the interest, the questions. And like you were saying, seeing those star students come out of, the woodwork, right? You're engaging students in a way that traditionally they haven't had the opportunity to.
Lena, would you say working with older students than Anna has, working with more college age students, do you see them having a longer kind of learning curve with being engaged with that kind of thinking if compared to starting at a younger elementary age, if you've worked with those students as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the learning, it's hard because, traditionally, especially because I work in a preservation organization, so the students that tend to gravitate or that we tend to reach are sort of inclined in that direction, right? They were sort of the lucky few that probably some point, if you talk to them early on in their lives, they had a moment or a mentor or something that geared them this way. So, I'm not usually involved with, a general college program that's not at least tangentially related to preservation. So it's hard to say, it's hard to answer that directly.
Okay, thank you. I think we're gonna jump to the Q&A from the audience members. So we have a question for Anna from Milan Jordan. So have you encountered any roadblocks via critical race theory within your curriculum?
Not yet. I'm waiting for the day. But I stand by it. I'm teaching the truth. We're looking at primary sources. I am not imparting my opinion ever. It's purely primary sources and the students are going to make their own connections. So I think if this ever comes back to me, I think my question would be, well, what am I saying that is CRT? If I'm working with primary sources, I would say that's not CRT.
We had a question from Christine Nguyen. I work for a local government and would love to engage younger generations to get their input on our preservation projects. Do either of you have any suggestions on how to reach out to them?
Yeah, contact your local school district. I know in LA Unified, so every school district is different, but in LA Unified, we can increase our salary by taking classes or doing these extra projects. So working with the district to get involved in that part of the district is helpful. So if you were willing to teach a class to teachers, and then those teachers could work with students, reaching out to principals of schools, and again, like Lena said, usually offering making a flyer offering these are the dates we're going to meet, this is what we're doing, this is going to be the impact, this is what the stipend is, and passing that along to the principal. Principals are almost always willing to share that sort of a thing with teachers. So if you don't know any teachers personally, principals and school districts will pass along what you have to offer if it's presented in like an organized manner.
And I was just going to add, we've had incredible success working with ACE Mentoring, and they have affiliates all over the country. And if there's a chance to collaborate with them on a project that is in the pipeline or in the works or in conception, letting the students have freedom of speech around what should happen to that building or that property, I think just gets them more. And then you have the opportunity to then tell them sort of what the citywide goals and initiatives are and get them sort of bought into that mission. I think it's been very successful so far.
Okay. We have more of a Lena geared question from Robin Jones. Is there any commentary on trades training programs and how preservation can support these, especially via funding?
Yeah, actually, one of the individuals that helped us develop the STEM program is someone who developed a preservation trades program in New York. And we are looking to, and traditionally when we practitioners go into colleges, we go into the same dozen colleges that feed primarily into the pipeline, right? So in Boston, a lot of focus goes toward a certain set of schools that just have that kind of programming that feeds into our pipeline really easily. So one of the things we're trying to do is when we go out is to go to more community colleges and trades programs and really reach students who aren't in that, that pre-established set of schools. We're trying to diversify where we go and try to see it less as like, a short-term recruiting tool and more like a long-term investment. So yes, and I'd be happy to share that individual's name. I just have to look it up really quickly.
And Lena, you reminded me too, another way that organizations can engage students is bringing kids to the place with field trips. Field trips are expensive and oftentimes they're one of the first things to get cut from a school budget. So if orgs are offering transportation, that's the biggest one. If you can offer transportation, folks will come. So if you have offices or you offer walking tours or whatever it is, and you invite students to come through school and it is free, then teachers will want to take their kids to see whatever your project is.
We have a question about critical race theory. Anna, do you have any advice for educators who want to teach historical preservation lessons based on social justice and equity, who might have resistance from other faculty members or from higher up?
It's my biggest advice is always anchor it in a primary source. Once you start talking about your own views or secondary sources that might have bias, that is when I think pushback can start to become more valid. But if you are like, here is the primary source, this is what the kids got from that, then my hope is people would see that you're just teaching history through primary sources. Also, there's the show both sides argument is challenging for me. However, okay, so here's an example. When I'm talking about the housing projects that were canceled due to the Red Scare in the Chavez Ravine, we'll talk about what was the argument of the people who wanted to cancel them. Usually, you're going to have a couple of students that agree with the folks that wanted to cancel the housing project, and just by showing two arguments from primary sources and talking about context, kids are going to form their own opinions. That's a
And
tough one, though. I commend you for trying and doing this work, even if you have colleagues and parents that are challenged.
and are you the only one in your district teaching this, or do you have other colleagues who are doing the same?
I am the only one, as far as I know, I'm the only one using this curriculum that I made. But I have a colleague that teaches LA history to 8th graders as an elective course. He does it a little bit differently than I do. And then there's also teachers throughout the district who are taking moments from LA history and weaving it throughout their curriculum. So I know there's a teacher at Lincoln High School in Lincoln Heights that does a huge unit on the LA walkouts, on the East LA walkouts when Chicano students were fighting for a better education. And so he focuses on just that component rather than the entire history, 1700s to now. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of teachers who are at the very least taking moments from LA history and weaving it. And hopefully soon, when it's a rostered class, more people will be willing to give it a shot.
Braden, I want to bring your attention. There was a question that was asked in the chat. Has there been any success in nonprofit groups creating an after-school class on historic preservation using some of the elements that were discussed? If anyone would like to answer, I can share as a staff with the nonprofit. We do have a few different programs that we have provided after school. Some of those programs have been in partnership with existing after school programs. So we might be co-teaching or co-facilitating, which has had a higher success than us coming in after school. Sometimes we're working, as Anna mentioned, with a teacher. Once you find a great teacher, a resource, they are a fantastic way to connect to the network of different teachers on campus and educators on campus. So I can speak from my experience that has been successful. At the same time too, we have had opportunities to work during the school day that does again align with or need to align with the curriculum and the coursework that the schools or the teachers already have planned. So there's a little bit more flexibility when you are after school. And there's a few different strategies I encourage you all to think about if that's something you're interested in. But Anna or Lena, have you had experience with that type of format?
Yeah, so we've similarly done it mostly in conjunction with or in partnership with an after school program that sort of has a STEAM focus or is in line at least somewhat with the materials, and they're open to having outside collaborators. So we've done that with Girls Inc. We've done that with ACE, as I mentioned, but there are, certainly there are other organizations like NOMA that have a project pipeline, which is a camp dedicated to sort of an architectural experience. And I think that those are invaluable. I think they're incredible. And I think the only issue with any after school program or sort of separate from school program is making sure that it's economically and otherwise accessible to a diverse range of students, right? It's not exclusionary in only the students who have the luxury to attend or to travel or to get to and from. So that's my only drawback to after school programming. Otherwise, I think it's wonderful.
That's a huge thing at our school too, because we're a magnet program. A lot of students are taking the school bus and they have to leave when the bus leaves. So the folks that stay at Beyond the Bell are usually, that's our after school program. They're usually neighborhood kids and not coming from the community, which is just a smaller portion of our students.
Thank you both. Those were all of our questions from the audience. So I think we'd like to address any takeaways that we've gotten from this conversation.
Well, I just saw something pop up very quickly about Girl and Boy Scouts. So actually one of my co-collaborators for the STEAM program is like the Northeast director of the Girl Scouts of America. And I'm going to tell her about this idea of adding a preservation badge because I think it's amazing. So thank you for that.
So Lena, there actually is, it's not called a preservation badge, but there's something similar. I have to look up the exact language. I actually recently came across it with a few different troops booking with us, programs with us. And so John, if there's a follow-up email with resources, we'll be sure to send that out to you all. But I encourage you all to check in with your local Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or online the different badge categories, because my understanding, at least the ones that I've been working with in Southern California, they do have a badge that's relating to history and heritage. And it is applicable with this work, aligns with this work. And so we actually, as an organization, are also in the process of providing that badge if students work with us. And so we're really excited about that.
That's amazing. I just pulled up all of the badges, and it's gotten a lot bigger since the last, when I was Girl Scout age. So no, I mean, I think my takeaway is that obviously there's a lot of interest, and I'm so happy to have been on this panel with Anna. Teachers like Anna, it's exactly, the people we want to find in the school system that can spread it from within. Because I think that what you said is so true. If you can connect with one person in the school system, they're your ambassador for the work. So that's my biggest takeaway, is to keep making those professional and academic connections, because that's how this is going to get sort of more cohesive and complete.
It's really beautiful to see you, Lena, and everyone here who is interested in getting this started with students in their communities, because there are teachers that want to do it. We're here. I'm by no means the only one. And so knowing that there are orgs that will offer curriculum, editable curriculum, love that, Lena, that you can pick and choose from, that there are orgs that want to offer students these real life experiences so that they can hopefully go into the careers is hopeful. And if you reach out to teachers in schools, people are going to be interested in this. Place-based learning is kind of a buzzword these days, right? So in education, so having these orgs that are willing to do that with students is wonderful.
Okay, well, we thank you all so much for your time today. We really appreciate your insight and your hard work and just sharing in this very great conversational space, and for all the great questions and active attendees.
I'd also like to add, I encourage you all to make note of the links and the resources that were shared in the chat. There are a few fantastic resources that were shared by various individuals. The chat will be saved. So John put in a link for the saved chat. So if you're not able to copy and paste really quickly, don't worry about that. But I encourage you all to continue this conversation. There's also a link to let us know how we did. Let us know how this conversation went today, how the panel went today. So please do provide that feedback. It helps us at the CPF Education Committee, who's putting on these events, know how we can improve in these conversations. And passing this back to Bray, but please do make sure to get all the great resources that were shared in the chat and continue the conversations within your networks.
I have nothing more to add, but again, thank you all very much. John, do you have any closing California Preservation Foundation statements?
No, I just wanted to thank, but first of all, both of you as our education committee members for organizing this program. But last but not least, our panelists who I learned a lot. I was inspired, and we would love to do more on this topic in the future. So I did paste into the chat box a link to the evaluation form. And what's funny, Anna, is every time we've heard from teachers at CPF, it's a science teacher. And I don't know why, but it's usually the science teachers who are most interested in preservation. So I just thought I'd throw that in there as an aside. So with that, I'm going to close out the meeting and thank you all. We have made a recording of this program You can find it on our YouTube channel and Facebook channel, and also on LinkedIn. And if you need the link to those, I'm happy to share it with you. Feel free to email cpf@californiapreservation.org. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.